This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey, everybody. So this is a very interesting conversation. So whether you are listening to this and you identify as male or female, whether you have kids or not, this is a really important discussion because we know that so many people are parents, and this challenge that parents have of trying to juggle being an effective parent and work, particularly when workplaces aren't as human as they can be, is very, very real. And it's something that anyone who is responsible for business strategy needs to be thinking about in a different light, which is why I loved this conversation that I had with Ashley Quinto Powell. She is a self-advocacy expert. She's a speaker and an author who is the founder of My VA Rocks, and she has a new book out called Executive Motherhood. And we talk about the need to protect parents as part of looking at executive pipeline. We talk a lot around this narrative that challenges us for asking for help and how that feeds into delegation and more. And wait until you hear how Arnold Schwarzenegger has inspired her. It's quite fascinating. I think there's a lot of really helpful nuggets in this conversation, and I hope you get a lot out of it and start thinking differently about how you move forward and advocate for yourself if you're a parent, and if you're not a parent, how you can be an ally to those who are. All right, Ashley, I am super jazzed to be having this conversation with you. And I think what I want to jump off with is just talking about things that I don't think we think about when it comes to diversity in the workplace and our workforce. And there's so much talk about still the great resignation or the great reshuffle or turnover to tsunami and quiet quitting and all these types of things. And what we know is that women are disproportionately affected when it's come through COVID and caregiving and whatnot, that more and more women are leaving or not coming back into the workforce for a whole host of reasons. And this is an area I know that you are deeply passionate about, and I think that we're not having enough conversation about. So talk to me about why you're so passionate about keeping working moms in the workforce if they choose to be.
Well, being a mom is amazing. And I think if that is in your heart, you should be able to do that. And I'm pretty alarmed at what I see from the young women who are just putting their toe into middle and senior level management, and they can't figure out how their current career trajectory will fit if they decide to have children, and they don't see good examples of it. And I think that's very, very sad. It should be alarming to us as a country. It should be alarming to us as other parents. We just don't make it easy on parents, moms in particular. And there is such amazing untapped brain power there. Moms statistically are more productive, more likely to want to be in senior level management. And as any parent can tell you, parenting for sure makes you a better manager. That's just how it goes. And as we're, from a business perspective, the best way to protect our executive pipeline is to make sure that women, as they are just getting going, aren't sent home because it's super hard to have babies and work and try to navigate it all.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting when you said the correlation between parenting and leadership? I can't tell you how many times when we are working with leadership teams where people say, oh, there's a lot of synergy with like these tools would also work in parenting. Bob Chapman of Barry Wehmiller always talks about this. And it's not about like in a hierarchical or shaming or like parental condescending way. When you care for people, when you have the responsibility of other people's livelihood and outcomes in your hands, like you have a whole lot of influence over that, there is some synergy. And so I think that's really critical. So talk to me about how do businesses and leaders start protecting that pipeline? Like how do they start to even realize, is this an issue for them? How do they even start to go about having different conversations where we're shifting the narrative around what it means to be successful as a parent and a successful contributor to an organization's purpose and goals and mission?
Certainly a good place to start is by examining how your organization currently treats parents And if people leave before they are ready to plant roots and ready to buy a house and get married and have children, or not necessarily even in that order, but if they're leaving you in order to do that, that's a really good sign that your workforce doesn't think the company is stable. So if you're working in startups, that's a young person's pursuit, right? You're wearing all the hats, you're running around like a one-armed paper hanger. It's half the fun of it. But when you're ready to get serious about your life, you go get a big serious job at a corporate place, not with the startup. And when we see in companies, people start to get married, have children, that's a really good sign that they see a future with the organization. When we have a woman who now says, I'm pregnant and I'm getting ready to go on 12 weeks maternity leave, our reaction is, oh, what are we going to do now? And it feels like an inconvenience. And it shouldn't be. It should be a symptom of success for companies as they grow, especially that someone felt like this was a stable enough place, that this was something they could consider in their lives. And then we need to support parents. So first we need to sort of examine every time someone gets pregnant. And then we need to examine if we are taking care of parents currently. And some of that is parents do really well with flexibility, especially around daycare pickups and soccer games. Are we flexible enough that parents are able to do that without shame? And oftentimes, actually, for women, it is not the case. It's one of those frustrating things where men take an afternoon to go coach baseball and they are lauded as the father of the year. And then when a mom does it, it's like, oh, again. So I think we really need to examine our biases and our attitude towards that currently. And then go deep into the policies and how we behave in general, what the expense policies are, for instance. And a good example of this is a company will pay for the taxi or the parking and the airfare and the hotel for someone who has to travel for work, but they will never reimburse for childcare, for instance. And if you're a single parent or you need childcare in order to go on a business trip, that can be a real career blocker. It shouldn't cost you money to go do business in another city. But this is where we are today with most companies.
It's so fascinating that you say that, because literally just last week, we were with a client group and was having a conversation with one of the individuals there. And she's a single mom, and she would talk about promotions, and she deeply loves this company. She's been there a long time. She's a huge advocate for them. She's the epitome of walking their purpose and values, like everything you would want in an employee. And they said, well, you've missed so many days. And she's like, it's not like I was out messing off or whatever. Like, I'm a single mom and I was not being irresponsible. I'm like taking care of my kids. And she's using her vacation time. And now it's a ding against her for promotion. And she's like, what the heck? There is a gender double standard. Here's these guys over there that are burning through their PTO to go golf and whatever. And all of my PTO is going to being a responsible parent and providing for my kid. And now I'm getting dinged with raises or getting held back for promotions. And what's sad about that is that story is not unique. And I think so many people don't realize that. And it happens way more than you realize. Or I'll talk to people and they're like, this job is not conducive to being a parent, whether you identify as male or female. And they'll say, the only way this works is my spouse is a stay-at-home parent. And that's the only way I can do this job. We both can't work because this job just demands way too much. And so that also I hear happening a lot. And then I hear a lot that with that, then there's higher divorce rate and stuff. So I just think this integration of people who want to be parents in their life and being able to also work if they want to. So many people end up with it as an either or rather than how can we have a both and.
Yeah. You're probably the same way. It's really important for me to feel vital. It's important that I still feel like a moneymaker. It's important that I have projects that use my brain. All of that is really important. And we know also that it is very difficult for most people to be in a household where one person works. So we've done that in my house where my husband stayed at home. And it was glorious. I had one of those jobs that I absolutely could not do if I had to go do pickups. And thank goodness he was there. When the roles are reversed, when a woman stays home, the husband is never like, oh, thank you. My career has been able to skyrocket because yours took a turn down. No, they are still under the impression that that's all them and they're working so hard and forget that there's an enormous support system behind them around laundry and groceries and making sure that the bills are paid. so that they can do nothing but work or concentrate mostly on work. And from my perspective, it's hard for most people to pull that off financially. And you are absolutely exchanging the working parent's career for the non-working parent's career.
You have kind of a unique take on this. Tell me about your organization and kind of how you're trying to help solve for this for people that want to contribute, that want to try to have both, but have it look differently and have it look more humane.
I founded a virtual assistant firm, My VA Rocks, in 2021, partly because I was trying to keep my consultancy afloat. My husband had just gone back to work. We were both entrepreneurs and had terrible insurance. And we sort of thought, well, if anybody gets COVID, I don't know what we will do. So entrepreneurial insurance is terrible. He went and got a job that had some pretty banging health insurance. And then I had both kids. They weren't used to me being at home. And I was trying to keep my business going. I was trying to administer virtual school. The stress in general of the pandemic, those were dark times. And I was not alone in how awful it really was. And from the VA perspective, being a virtual assistant is truly flexible. You can really work from anywhere. You can make your own hours. You can determine how many hours those are. You really have true flexibility. And from an employer standpoint, we feel like that's the reason we're doing this. And so we protect it and we make sure that all of our clients are on board, that our VAs have super flexible schedules. But on the other side, on the executive side, the client, it's really important too that clients be able to focus on what matters and handing off all of that admin to someone who can take care of it faster and better. We always hear these stories about people staying up late or working on Saturdays to catch up with their email. Nobody is actually paid for being incredibly responsive on email. Just doesn't happen. But here we are with this huge burden of all the admin. And I'm convinced that when people can get rid of the little stuff, they can focus on the big stuff. And it's the big stuff that pays us. It's the big stuff that pushes our businesses and careers forward, not this little stuff that we can hand off.
There's so much richness in what you said, and whether someone is hiring a VA or even on their teams delegating. I literally am coaching several leaders right now that have a self-limiting belief around being responsible and about self-sufficiency, and that I have to do it myself, and that either me handing it off means that somehow I'm less than, or I'm less responsible, or me handing it off means I'm letting go of control, or that it won't be done perfectly. So I think whether someone is in a position where they're thinking of hiring a VA or even just within an organization, it's the whole, how much do you take on? And I've been guilty of this, but you know what? Every individual only has so much capacity. And so when we don't tap into and leverage the gifts and talents of other people who probably want to contribute and maybe have more interest or more capacity, and yeah, it might take a little bit more upfront to train them, but it pays off. So often we are our own worst enemy and we get in our way of asking for help, of accepting help, of delegating, thinking that we're somehow supposed to be able to do it all. And what's been your experience with that? Because I see it in every organization that we work with, this shows up to some degree.
There are lots of barriers to asking for help. And in our personal lives, we have trouble with it. In our business lives, we have trouble with it. It's hard to ask for help. And where I sit in Wisconsin, we have very strong entrepreneurs who are very familiar with their own bootstraps. They will carry the load up a mountain without complaint. So we have really been taught, if you want to do it right, you do it yourself. You can't give it to someone else or it somehow is invalid. But also I think it's very scary. Letting someone see your business for the first time, I think is like opening up your closet and having your high school crush see how messy it is or how many tags are still on it or how awful it is. I think every entrepreneur is a little afraid that someone is going to lift up the curtain and see what a mess it is behind. I think that is a big part of it. I also think a big part of it is this fallacy that it's easier to do it myself. We know that that's an uneven exchange. I think about the ways that we judge our own productivity, and it tends to be very, very task-based because for our whole career, we have said, all right, here are the 10 things I'm going to accomplish today. I'm just going to tick them off. But when you're an entry-level employee, that's a perfect way to manage your time. When you're in charge of strategy, that's a terrible way to determine your time because inevitably those little tick marks are wasted time. You need to be focused on big thinking. You need to be focused on big research, big problem solving. And if you're stuck solving everything on a to-do list, you are never going to get to the strategy.
That is money right there. No pun intended. I literally just had a conversation with someone. I'm trying to decide if I'm ready for C-suite and do I want to level up? And I have a lot of these conversations where people are at a critical juncture within their career, a lot of times in a formal leadership role of trying to decide, what do I need to work on? And so often it is the mindset shift of being in the day-to-day, in the weeds, like on the dance floor, as we talk about, versus being able to look at what is it going to take for you to move up to the balcony, because that's the work that is required, of being able to have that horizon view, of being able to look at how the pieces fit together, of being able to hold that strategy as a compass for people and rally them around and trust that other people are going to do the day-to-day. I have someone now, it's like, I have great attention to detail and I double check everybody's stuff. And I'm like, how deflating is that? And you've just trained them. Even if you're not trying to be, you have just enabled them and trained them that they never have to double check their own work, because you're going to come in and double check before this goes out the door. And you think about the dollars and the resources. And so this is such a pervasive narrative, I think, that keeps people stuck. Besides the like, hey, I have to do it myself, or somehow, how do I measure my productivity? I do want to go back to the asking for help part, because I know I'm guilty of it and I'm getting way better at it, right? And I catch myself. And I talk to so many people that have this thing of, I'm going to be the sacrificial lamb. I'm going to be the martyr. I'm going to do everything for my team, but I'm depleted. They know that, oh, you're supposed to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. Many of us know that intuitively. It happens with everybody, but it is particularly prevalent with females. It's hardwired to be caretakers and stuff. So talk about how we can reframe the self-limiting belief that we might have as females, or those of you listening that are an ally to females, around this idea of self-care, and particularly people who are trying to both be an effective parent and an effective contributor to work.
I think a lot about how in the Midwest, we would much rather move cities entirely than fire our hairdresser or give the cleaner feedback about what they're doing. And to that end, I have two hairdressers. I have one for curl and one for color. I absolutely would never fire them. It's the hardest thing to do. And giving that feedback feels really awful. And I think it can feel like a failure. And we're terrible also at how we offer help. Hey, let me know what I can do for you is like, hey, you truck on doing whatever it is you need. And if you become desperate enough that you can name how I can help, then I will step in. And so I also encourage people to ask around them, name 3 things I can do to help you, instead of this open-ended but pretty closed question around, let me know how I can help. This is an American ideology that we are independent and that we don't have to rely on other people. And we are convinced that is absolutely the best way. But I think a lot of it is fear too, but also asking and having someone see that you are not perfect is really tough.
We like to somehow think that I'm really perfect. No one's going to know. As a business owner, how do you treat and show your people that they're valued as human beings? Because one of the things that is the anchor of all of our work is rehumanizing workplaces, and really people feel like they can be a human and that they're a whole person. What are some of the tangible things that you're doing as a business owner to really make that come alive for your people?
It's a good question. And actually, the Glassdoor reviews that my company has are absolutely out of this world. They are glowing. But if you dig a little deeper, they all say the same thing, which is they treat everyone like a human being. And that should absolutely be table stakes. That should not be the heart of a glowing Glassdoor review. And I think this is why women are better at this sort of stuff. We are intuitive. We take care of the people around us. To your point, sometimes when that isn't even to our advantage. And from a culture perspective, we think about inclusion quite a lot. I particularly like inclusive spaces everywhere I go because I know I will be accepted if a space is accepting of anyone. And I find that very comforting. But from the top down, I think we know that everybody is human and fallible, and it's okay to make mistakes. We use a design thinking approach to the way that we innovate. And I think that's really helpful too, sort of the expectation that we will fail and that will be okay. We're going to try all sorts of experiments. When you have that as the heart of who you are as a company, it really gives space for people to share ideas, no matter how radical they are, knowing that they're not going to be shot down, knowing that they're not going to be laughed at, that it's probably going to get tried, and build from there.
We always say that people only support what they've helped to create. So when you create a psychologically safe space where people can contribute their ideas and try stuff with expectation that this is like in pilot mode or revision mode or that it's not going to be perfect, I think that makes it safer for people to want to stick their neck outs a little bit. What are some other things that you do that have people say they treat me like human? What are some things that you just maybe take for granted that other companies could be thinking about?
We really do take the flexibility piece very seriously. I genuinely do not care if you take the afternoon off or if you go pick up a sick kiddo or if you just decide that today is beautiful and I'm not working after 3. I think all of that is totally valid. And we want people to take advantage of that because working from home is really challenging, as it turns out. And so you really need to lean into those perks. And we make space for that with our clients too, so that they have an expectation that this is the way our culture works. And I don't mean missing meetings, certainly, but we're not on call all the time typically. So I think that probably helps a little bit. We have a lot of people who can't handle that right at first. It's really jarring. I hire people who know what they're doing, and then I trust them to do what they're really good at. And most people come from environments that are so toxic. That's a lot to get used to. And right at first, it's very common for someone to ask a lot of permission questions. Do you have a dress code? No, I don't have a dress code. I'm wearing sweatpants. Okay, well, are you tracking to see when I'm showing up to work? No, I'm absolutely not. This is not prison. You're working. You're doing great work. We're going to be able to tell that you're doing great work. And so I think that actually is a little hard to get used to for most people, especially if you've come from a toxic environment.
One of the things that struck me is you said, rather than being sad or whatever when people move on, is that you actually celebrate when people move on. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that corporate speak, like the employee life cycle, right? From like before someone's ever an employee to all the time during to even beyond. And if someone leaves your organization, they're still part of your orbit and you want them to be an advocate. You want them to be someone who's going to refer people back, even though they've decided to move on. And you have such a healthy and great approach to this.
Oh, thank you. That must have been what you were trying to get at and that I was missing entirely. I don't even think about it as being a thing. But when I started the company, I thought we would lose people really frequently. I thought that was going to be a much larger problem than it really ended up to be. And I wanted to protect our clients. I wanted to protect our bottom line. And so I built in all of these mechanisms for backup. So frankly, if someone just gets sick or goes on vacation, we can slide another virtual assistant in without the client missing a beat. That's sort of the ideal situation. And I thought we would be having to replace virtual assistants frequently. It has the risk of being a career with a pretty fast turnover. As it turns out, we keep really good people along a really long time. They're not leaving us for other virtual assistant firms. When they leave, they're leaving because the business that they were working on in the background is ready to take them full time, or they're ready to get back to whatever their dream job was. And we want to be put in a position where we're celebrating that as much as possible. We work with these people for a year or two and then we're just going to spit you out? I don't think so. We're rooting for you and we want you to be bonkers successful because we like you. And I think everybody that I love should be Scrooge McDuck style successful.
I love that because there is a lot of weirdness when someone gives a notice and they're leaving, or, there can be animosity, or we're going to like try to get every last thing out of you before you go type of a thing. And there ends up being a lot of ickiness and shame. And so I love that you celebrate when people move on rather than it's a bad thing or a sign of weakness. It's, no, that's really cool and let's celebrate. And I think that also goes into when we treat people well when they move on, rather than it's a bad thing, it is an opportunity for them to still be a referral source, a brand ambassador, all of those types of things. So love that.
And from a tactical perspective, we tend to get way longer than 2 weeks notice. Maybe we'll get months notice where someone says, I'm thinking about moving on. I'm also game to help my VAs get where they're going. And so in many circumstances, right now, for instance, we have someone who is a whiz at operations. She has such an operations brain. And when we started talking about what her career would look like, I don't know if it was in her head ahead of time, but I said, you should have a consultancy around the operation stuff you love so much. And so that's what she started to do. And she started to find leads and start to talk to people. We did, when we started onboarding specialists, we pair all of our new client VA matches with an onboarding specialist who's there to make sure that everything is set up appropriately. and that the communication mechanisms are in place, that the project management mechanisms are in place. So we put her on that team and matched her with clients who needed operations help. And as part of that, she was able to get way more experience on the operations side. As she was getting ready to leave, which we have known about for months, and she'll leave at the end of this month, I have introduced her to people who will hire her. We've made sure she has testimonials. We've really tried to set her up for success. But tactically, it also means we're not getting blindsided when we lose a really valued member of the team. Instead, we're part of it. We're helping make it happen. And in return, she's helping make sure that we are set up for her absence. We'll feel it, but we will not be in a scramble because she will have set us up really well.
Yeah, you're not in a situation where you're like, someone's walking in going, okay, I hate this place, and I'm not even giving you notice. Boom, I'm out. That's when you know, something's off. I want to circle back to when we were talking about these self-limiting beliefs and self-limiting narratives that we have, because one of the things that I'm obsessed with is normalizing the messiness of being human. And I know that regardless of how much work we've done on ourselves, or regardless of how successful we are, however you define that, it is human for us to tell ourselves these stories that are self-limiting, that keep us safe and small. And so, Ashley, what I would love is if you would be willing to share, what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up, how do you move beyond it so that you can still show up as a leader in your life?
My self-limiting belief is, oh, I'll never be that successful, or that somehow will elude me, or that is somehow for other people. And this is not just me. And it shows up every once in a while when I have a really challenging week or a really challenging day. And I had a really challenging week last week where everything that was hard was harder and every obstacle was impossible. And it just felt like one thing after another. We know this as business owners, right? That's like a par for the course. You have to work through all the mess. I found myself thinking, it's just not for me. This is not in the cards for me. And I have found on self-limiting beliefs that the thing to do is to confront it head on, talk back to your self-talk. Why wouldn't I? Here's the thing. I'm very passionate about how inspired I am by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I do not mean the new documentary that came out because I have not even watched it. What I am talking about is this man from a small town in Austria decided that he wanted to become Mr. Universe. So he did. And then after becoming Mr. Universe, he became a very successful actor. And then after that, he became a very successful politician. He went to the top of everything that he tried without any evidence that he would be successful. So why does this little kid in Austria think he can become Mr. Universe? It's probably hard work and confidence. And how does Mr. Universe, who has a thick accent and no acting ability, think that he's going to become a movie star? He did. And then what evidence does a movie star have that they're going to be successful in politics? None. But he took pure confidence and hard work and made it into 3 very successful careers. And now a 4th, he has a new show. That's absolutely terrific. But he did that without having talent and evidence. And it wasn't obvious to anyone outside of him that he was going to be successful in those 3 things. Here's why I find this so inspiring. If you think about like, oh, I'm great at this, I should be successful. He didn't even have that, and he became super successful. So of course we can do it because willing to work hard and have actual talent. So let's do it.
Oh my God, I love that. I never thought of that. But yeah, it is funny. It's like, who am I not to be? And talking back to that, in coaching, we call it a gremlin, but it's that voice of, if you ignore it, it gets louder. But if you acknowledge it and then confront it and be like, listen here, I love it. So Ashley, are you ready for quick questions?
I am.
Fill in the blank. Living authentically is
working only as much as you have to.
Interesting. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do?
Encourage my team.
Nice. What's something people would be surprised to know about you?
I tore my ACL log rolling, which is the most ridiculous injury story ever. And that's sort of the whole story. You're not missing anything. I went log rolling. I tore my ACL.
I don't know how many people log roll, so that by itself is interesting. All right. What's your favorite go-to movie?
Love Actually.
Good one. What is your go-to song?
Going to Graceland. It's Paul Simon. Even Simon and Garfunkel during that phase. I really like Paul Simon. But there is something about going to Graceland that is a metaphor for life, and I just think it's so beautiful.
I do love me some Paul Simon, so there you go. What is something you can't live without?
My husband. I often joke that if he ever kicks the bucket, I'm going to throw myself on his funeral pyre because he's so wonderful. I love him so much. And anyway, now that we work together, we spend all of our time together. I don't know how I would possibly go on.
He'll be happy to hear that. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Oh, my babies. I have so much fun being a mom, and my kids are now 8 and 10. It hasn't always been this fun. I have to say we're in sort of a sweet spot, but my kids are funny. My daughter is fierce. They have their own way of thinking, their own way of dressing. And I think the whole thing is so magical, and watching them grow up is such an honor and a privilege.
I love that. And what are you grateful for right now?
A beautiful weather and the opportunity to enjoy it.
Being in Minnesota, yeah, we have to enjoy the nice weather. We're recording this in the summertime.
So you're in the same boat, right? It's either snowing for 9 months out of the year or too hot.
Yep, exactly. All right. My final closing question for you, Ashley. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
I would have them focus on making sure your employees have a really good friend at work. Statistics show that happiness at work, one of the key indicators is if they have a really good friend at work. And everybody has those experiences. You take that really good friend with you for your whole life. And especially remotely, we have the risk of being in silos and being really lonely. It's one of the reasons I think working from home absolutely stinks, because you miss the social aspect of working. And our businesses and our work lives would be way more humane if we focused on the social aspect of what we're doing as a mechanism for building great teams.
I love that so much. And I just want to thank you for putting a new lens on thinking about, you talk about protecting our pipeline and whatnot, because I don't think enough people are thinking about the disproportionate challenges that face women in the workplace, particularly parents, women who are parents in general, but usually the moms out there. And just thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for this conversation. And thank you, as you are building your business, for being a voice for how we can create human workplaces. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosie. It was a pleasure talking with you.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.